Welcome back to Jessica's Craft Time. My name's Jessica, and today we are on the last episode of our chocolate house. So we're starting with the roof here. Now, there was a problem. I was missing a piece. It's been a while since I ordered this one. I thought I ordered it with a dust cover as well, but wasn't in the box. I'm not going to contact the company. I'm not going to sit around and wait for a month or so for the pieces to come in. I'm just going to deal with it and work with it, and it worked fine. So we're just putting the pieces together. I'm just using a tacky glue here. Now I've just moved the inventory sheet underneath because I didn't want to get glue all over the table, and we are just trying to glue a couple of bits together to make a square without sticking it on the paper. A few of these bits I needed to leave dry, come back to. So we work there. This is where I'm missing the back piece. It's not so bad because I just left it out basically. I don't think you'd ever really notice. I have used a PVA glue here, which I probably should have used a tacky glue. It would have held a bit quicker, but the PVA went on really nicely and it gave me a lot of wiggle room. So I just had to work out which way they went, which bit went into which bit, and try and square it up because this is the whole roof of the thing. And as you can see, the more you touch it, it falls apart. Try not to keep touching it once you get it right. Just leave it. It'll do. It'll work. It'll be fine. And then I realized I put the extra glue on, so I've just wiped that off. Now this has a fairly thick acetate sheet that sits in, and I'm trying to work out whether it sits on the wood or it sits in it. I ended up working out that it actually just sits on the wood. So then you've got to peel this backing bit off. And then I'm like, maybe because I'm missing that piece, I could do the other one. No, we'll just put this in and then we'll put the top piece on like it's meant to be. So I'm just going to put glue right around the edge of it. There's just a tiny, tiny, like a mil wide gap around the edge that this little bit of plastic sits on. So gave up putting the toothpick on and just grabbed the whole bottle. And then I just use the toothpick to sort of smear it over and flatten it out a little bit. And then comes the challenge of trying to get the damn paper off this acetate. Great because it protects it, but it's painful to get off, and then it rips and you got to try again, and we get there in the end. And that just slots in, and I'm just going to move this to the side and let it dry. I just moved it off the paper just so it wasn't sticking. And this is where you got to just stop attaching. I put the paper in half so it wasn't too sticky and just move it. Just move it now. Oh no, I think I did put the top bits on. And I use the PVA again just because my tacky glue is getting a bit low and it's a bit hard to get like a fine line of glue out. So I pop that on and we're just going to move that to the side. Forget about it. Done. Let's wait for it to dry. So we're going to make a little light here that hangs on the roof. This was a challenge getting the wires through the bottom of this bead because the bead opening wasn't very big. I probably should have gone and got hubby's files and just filed it a bit bigger. But in the end, I just put sticky tape around the end of it, just plain old clear sticky tape you'd use to wrap a present, and use that to poke it through because I tried and tried and tried and it just didn't work. So I just wrapped it as tight as I could and then sort of ended up cutting it into a little bit of a point because it was still too wide at the end. I wasn't giving up. I was determined to make it work. Trim it off so it's a point. Yay, we got it through. Tweezers pulled it and yay, it came through. And then we just want to put the second bead on the top here. And a little bit of tacky glue in there because it's going off to the side to dry. And our light is done. Now that one actually hangs from the top. Now I've got to make another wall for the house. So I've just grabbed a plastic baggie this time because I thought it would be easier to get it off the plastic. I'm just laying all my pieces out as they are in the instructions just so it makes it easier to find which piece I need where. And it's just a matter of placing them all together. And which sections need a little bit of glue, which ones don't. And then I put the glue on that one, and I didn't like it. The side that was facing out wasn't a very nice side of that piece of wood, so we started again. Now this is where you want to keep going until you get it all constructed, because you've got bits that lean up against other bits. If one bit's slightly out, it's not going to work. I should have probably double checked this one while it was drying, because the pink bits I'm just putting on now did actually move, but that's okay. It hadn't quite dried when I'd attached it to the house. So this is the whole front of the building that we're creating here, and I do need to stick some acetate sheet on it, but I need to let it dry a little bit first before I flip it over. So off to the side it goes. Let's work on another piece. This is just a doorway, and I'm just using the Tombow glue. I use that when I'm sticking like large sheets of paper, because you've got a little bit of wiggle room, but it's not going to bubble the paper. And now we're just doing the floor. So we're getting towards the end. This is the whole floor of the house. Yay! And the floor is done. So now we've got to do one of the side windows. This window, oh, I was ready to kill it towards the end, but I got it done. So you stick it on, and then you have to then cut the little archway out. So I've got my cutting mat, and I'm just using my craft knife just to go in the edges, right around the edges, and cut it out. And just keep going to all the little spots that hadn't quite cut. And we've got our window cut out. And that's the side wall there. So now we need to stick the back wall on. And your instructions tell you which piece needs to stick where. Now this was a little bit hard yet again, because I probably could have done it and waited for it to dry, but I tried to keep going and things fell apart a couple of times, but I got there in the end. This is sort of like the little box in the back that will enclose your lighting and your music box if you happen to have got a music box. And this is where it was like, these are not quite dry, they're not going to stay, but let's just keep battling on and we'll see where it ends up. So I'm kind of just like, okay, just stay. Just stay. Don't move. Just stay. Whoa, no. Whoa, it all fell. And this is where I start getting really frustrated with myself, but we get there in the end. I think I decided to turn it, upright so that the weight wasn't on it. And you've got a piece of paper that covers it. So I'm like, how am I going to get this to work? So what I did is I measured each side, and then I marked the paper and scored it. That way I was able to get my folds nice and straight, and they were quite crisp on the corner. And I thought, if I get the paper on now too, that's going to kind of hold the whole thing together. So I'm just going to fold it, and then I'll put the glue on the actual paper, because it's a bit hard to try and put it on the wood. And I just made sure that I covered enough glue in the corners and then bent it round the house using my fingers, using a ruler to get into the sides. And that will hold it together a little bit while it dries. And for some reason I had a little bit extra on the edge, so I just trimmed that off with my craft knife. Again, I do like to use a metal ruler because it's a lot easier to cut with a craft knife. If you try and do that with a plastic ruler, you're likely to dint the plastic ruler. So now it's about starting to put it together. So just roughly guessed where that corner bit was and putting the edge together. and we've got to decorate the inside. I've still got a few signs to put up. Now, this window, I'm not sure how much I got on camera because I started to get really, 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 really frustrated with it. The window was meant to pop in, but the window itself, the frame was too big for the hole. And I'm sorry, it's off camera, but I was getting so frustrated. I'm like, maybe it is meant to stick on the outside. I'm like, no, that doesn't work because then it looks really tacky. You've got the raw paper on the inside. So I kept putting glue on and I'm like trying to force it in. I've never had an issue before trying to get my things like windows in. They've always fitted. So each kit comes with a little bit of sandpaper. I was getting so frustrated. I'm like, why is this not fitting? So I got the sandpaper out and I could kind of see the bottom corners were rounded on the frame, but my window wasn't actually rounded. So I sandpapered it down again, tried to fit it in. No, it wouldn't go in. I'm like, brute force, I don't want to break it. In the end, I had to sand the corners off and sand down the bottom quite a fair bit to get it actually to go in. I then had to clean all the plastic acetate because by then I got glue all over it, which is what I'm doing with the baby wipe. I've got another microfiber cloth that I use to try and polish it up. I got glue around the frame. I got glue everywhere. It wasn't in. I'm like, oh, maybe you could leave it just sticking out. I'm like, no, that doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good. So I just keep sandpapering until finally I managed to force it in there. I can't remember if I actually put glue on it before I actually managed to force it in. But I'm like, if I've had to force this in here, it's not coming out. So I needed a little bit more sandpaper. It just wasn't going in. It was really, really doing my head in at this point. I was so over it. I'm like, would you just go in? So I just kept sandpapering. And of course, every time I sandpapered, the little bits of sandpaper I got off got under the acetate and it looked dodgy. In the end, yeah, I didn't put any glue on that. I just forced it in and cleaned up the window and as much glue as I could off it, both on the inside and the outside. it was a hot mess. Probably should have tried to do that before I constructed the wall. And then we're just going to put the last wall up here. And we've got the front wall, but we need to wait for that to dry a little bit. So my baby wipe was definitely my friend here. Definitely. We've got some signage on the wall to go inside. Just using my tweezers to pick them up. We've got a little sign that we made earlier. And just starting to decorate it. Now, the downside was I really enjoyed all the instructions with this one, except for when it came to putting it together, because at this point, the instructions should have told me to put everything inside. From my experience, I should have known to put everything inside, excuse me, but I didn't. So it made it a little bit harder to put things in. We're just putting the acetate sheeting on here, or the window, and I'm going to glue my frame up. So I just sort of positioned it to see what was touching where and pop the glue on. So before I put that wall on, I should have filled the inside. I just wasn't thinking. I was following the instructions, and the next thing I'm like, where did the instructions go to put that on? We just got to put some lace trim on the inside. I wasn't going to do it, but it actually looks really good, and I'm glad I did. So I'm just putting double-sided tape along the top. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get glue in there to hold it while it's drying. Let's tape it. My go-to for everything is a bit of double-sided tape. So that's what I did. You don't see the top section of it. It's behind the wood, and I just press that in. Alright, so now we're back to making the sign. I should have made this earlier. I didn't. Oh, I realized I had to put the light on. So trying to get the light to stick on acetate. I never know what the best way to do it is. Excuse me. So in the end, I ended up just using some clear sticky tape. I can take it off if I want to. I've left it on. It's at the back of it. You don't really notice that it's there. And that just held the corner of the wire in, and then it was going to dangle. So once it was being sort of held in place with that sticky tape, I just used some E6000 glue to adhere it to the roof. The E6000 is the glue that I use when we're gluing plastic and metal bits. So we've got to make this light here. You've got to pull the twine. Now I probably made it hanging a little bit low, but it's fine. It's fine. Like, how do I attach it? Good old double-sided tape again. So I just put some double-sided tape on it, and this twine is what the actual sign hangs off the building on. So trimmed it down, stuck it on. Yep, all good. And then we just need to attach one side of the sign, and then the wire goes in because this is a lit sign, and attached to the back side of the sign. And then when the light comes on, it lights up the sign, which is really cute. I really like it. And then it just hangs off the wooden bit, but we need to let that dry before we try and hang it. So now we're up to starting to put things together. I've got the lights. I had to then go out and get batteries because it was one of the light fittings that has the little round batteries, not your normal AA or AAA, and it didn't quite fit in the hole properly, but that's okay. It can sit there. I find that I'm not very good at wiring, and they tend to get knocked, and I have to rewire them all the time anyway. I really need to sort of learn how to do it properly, but we're getting there. So I've just got to attach the sign, and what I ended up using is, in your kit you get this white tape that you normally use to wrap the wires, but I'm like, I want to hold this on the side of the building, and the building's basically white, so I just bulldog clipped the wires to the ceiling, and then I just use this white tape to hold the wires in place, because I'm like, if the wires are pulling on the sign, it's going to pull the sign off the wall. So I've got to put the little sign up, and I had to try and hold it there for a little bit while it sort of became a little bit tacky to hold it so it didn't fall off. Because as you can see, every time I touch it, it falls off. So that's where I got a little bit more of the white tape, and I taped the wires a little bit more sturdy near where the sign is hanging, and that was enough to kind of hold it in place. It's very hard to tape it neatly when you're trying to get two wires to stay in the same spot, and that sort of held the wires enough that it held it in place to tape the sign. This is one of the last things that we need to make, and this is our lamppost. So I've got my E6000 glue again, and I've got to just glue that little bead on, and then I put the glue in the wrong spot, so I'm like, damn it, we'll try again. I think I was just getting really tired. I kept making silly little errors. And then it comes with like it almost looks like a toothpick that's not pointy at either end, and I just shove that up the top, and then you've got to cover the whole lot in some brown paper. So I covered the brown paper in glue, going, yep, I'm going to get covered in glue again, but we'll get there. And my glue, if I don't leave it up the wrong way, then it's just so hard to get out. But there's still so much glue in it. It's just, because it's so thick, it doesn't want to pour. So this was a bit of a challenge trying to wrap the paper. It didn't really want to wrap very well. So I just kept manipulating it until it kind of stuck. And then I needed a little bit more glue just to put that bottom bead on, which is the base of the lampshade. And the wires were pushing it the wrong way, and then the paper was coming apart. It was doing my head in. I'm like, just work for me. I just want you to work at this point. So I think I ended up getting a little bit of blue tack. Yeah, I did. And I blue tacked it to my tray to sort of sit up and try and dry a little bit so we could keep moving on. Now it's time to start putting bits and pieces. I'm just making sure my roof. Now I haven't glued the roof down. I think it'll be alright as long as you're careful when you move it. Oh, excuse me. I've just let it sit on there, and I'm going to attempt to make my own dust cover for it. But we're going to start putting all the bits and pieces in. So we've got a welcome sign on the front mat, all our little flower pots and all our bits and pieces. We've got the awning here. Now, when I put the awning up, I did use a little bit of washi tape just to hold it in place because, as you can see, it fell off. So I just got a little bit of washi tape that will come off easily, but enough just to hold it in place while the glue dries for it. We've got our door that we need to put on. And now I'm starting to get myself in a mess. There's stuff everywhere, and I hate working like this. But I've got instructions. I've got all these bits everywhere. I'm like, what am I doing with myself? There's stuff everywhere. No one can see anything. Let's just keep going and getting it there. So I'm just sticking the door on now, which is a bit of glue down the side, and the door sticks open. It's not a door that can be moved open or shut. And it's just, I went and got the box with all my bits and pieces, and I did actually work out that one of the counters I'd made with the wood on the wrong end, but there's nothing I can do about that now. It's dry, it's glued, we'll live with it. So it's just a matter of finding all your little bits and pieces and gluing them down. Most of it I glue down with tacky glue. Even the little bags, I just put a bit of tacky glue on the bottom, and that'll all dry. So just all the little bits. Now this was a bit tricky again to get my lamppost in, and I ended up using just plain old sticky tape to hold the wires in place. It just wasn't standing upright. I'm like, okay, I need to tape the wires down to basically hold it upright. I love the little tulip pot that I just put in then. And it's just, yeah, glue on the bottom, putting them in. Make sure you're putting things in that you can still work around, that you can get bigger bits in. And this is where I probably should have left all these outside bits and done all the inside before I put that other wall on. So now I'm just working out this wire. I didn't want to use a white tape because the floor's not white. Sorry. Too much talking. So I just put some sticky tape on it. The wiring at the back ends up being a complete and utter mess. That's okay. No one's going to see the back unless they take it off your shelf and have a look or to turn it on. But I just used some sticky tape just to hold the wire in place. I did try and run it along the corner, but it was enough to hold it in place. And then I'm like, no, I need one more little bit there because if I press on that, that's going to hold it up in the right position that I want. See, I went and looked back through my instructions. I'm like, was I meant to? When was I meant to? Oh well, let's do it now. Let's get all the furniture on the inside. And this is a cupboard that the edge should have been on the other edge because that's what's open. Instead, the edge was against the wall. So it was a little bit difficult to get in. And if I had have done this before I put the front on, it would have made it a lot easier because I ended up getting glue all over the floor. I just checked that each piece is going to fit before I put glue on it and drop it down. And then we've got the counter to go in. So it was only 3 bits of furniture on the inside other than what was hanging on the walls, which wasn't too bad, but it just would have been a lot easier to do earlier on. We've got our little umbrella and our chair. The chairs, I literally just stuck the legs into the E6000 glue because they're not flat. When you cut them with the wire cutters, they always have that little point. And just putting the last bits and pieces, and we're almost done. I really, really enjoyed this one. There was a lot of fiddly bits with the paper, which I'm not great on. I've stuck the flower pot on the side here, and this is where I end up taking the tape off the top and using it around the side just to hold it in place while it dries. But I really enjoyed creating this one. And now it's for the wiring. So you want to make sure your white wires are with your white wires and your grey ones are with your grey ones. And I just pulled a little bit extra off. What was making me nervous is I've done this before and then I've ended up with too shorter wires, and the wires that were coming out of the back of the like actual music, the light box were very, very small. I had heaps of wires for the lights, but they were actually quite small, and I didn't quite do this well enough. I turned it on for Mark later in the day and then realized that the lights weren't coming on. So I went and checked to see if I had batteries, and I didn't. So we've wired all up now. I had to go and get batteries, which I did, and we'll soon see the finished product. But I really enjoyed making this little chocolate room. If you've enjoyed these videos, please think about giving me a thumbs up. We've got another one coming up, and it's going to be a bit of a challenge. The instructions are not overly clear, and I've been putting it off, but it's the next one to do. So I hope you've enjoyed this chocolate house and you give it a go yourself. They're a lot of fun. All up, I think this took about 12 hours to do. So this is a finished product with the lights on. So yeah, around about 12 to 15 hours to create it. But a lot of fun doing it. Lots of challenges, lots of swearing, but a lot of fun. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next miniature room. Take care for now.